If you see a black man and your automatic assumption is guilt, that is racist. And I don't think that that's something that we talk about enough. I think that we're at a point where we are so stagnant in terms of how we deal with race issues because we are so limited in our conception of what racism even is. We don't have a clear and updated definition. We're still operating using the definitions from the 1960s, you know, back when discrimination and racism were legal. And so people are thinking that, oh, well, because we don't do that, because none of this is institutionalized necessarily, then it isn't racist. And no, you can still be motivated by racist ideology and act in racist ways. Moving on to this next story about the 14-year-old kid in Rochester, Michigan.
14-year-old kid.
A child. So, a 14-year-old African-American boy stopped to ask for directions to school, but was shot at instead. So Jeffrey Ziegler, apparently he was arraigned Friday because he shot at this little black boy who was asking him for directions to school.
Oh yeah, and he shot him with a 12-gauge shotgun.
Just really take a second and think about that. That he saw a little black boy in broad daylight, and his response was to shoot at him, and then ask questions later. And with the intent to kill him. Because what the assumption was that he was gonna rob him or something. So the little boy's name is Brennan Walker. So it says that he overslept and missed the bus to school Thursday morning. He didn't have his phone. He tried to trace the bus route, but ended up lost and began knocking on doors for directions. And so this is now quoting him. I got to the house and I knocked on the lady's door. Then she started yelling at me and she was like, "Why are you trying to break into my house?" And I was trying to explain to her that I was trying to get directions to Rochester High, and she kept yelling at me. The guy came downstairs and then he grabbed the gun and I saw it and I started to run. And that's when I heard the gunshot, he told the station. So luckily, this little boy was not hurt. He ran away. He hid and cried, it says. And I mean, it doesn't occur to you. You don't see a little boy and assume that, oh, maybe he needs help. Maybe he is. That's not what occurs to you. What occurs to you is that, oh, this child must be trying to rob my house at 8 a.m. On a Thursday. That is ridiculous. And so I think that this man, like many others, might argue that he is not racist. That he doesn't have a problem with black people. That it's not about the color of this kid's skin. But no, the assumption of criminality, the assumption of guilt, the assumption of ill intent without asking any questions, regardless of whether you ask questions. If you see a black man and your reaction, your gut reaction is to be fearful, you're racist. Like there is no other way around that. There's no explanation that's justified. And I think that the sooner that we identify and stick with the definition of racism and people understand where their thoughts and their fears come from, the sooner we'll be able to rectify and mitigate some of these issues that continue to happen, because people aren't thinking twice before calling the police. People aren't thinking twice before shooting.
Yeah.
I think that we need to check ourselves, even for thoughts that we aren't necessarily proud of. No, maybe it doesn't feel good to be called racist, but that's what you are.
I'm all about statistics and looking at, numbers and evidence. And we know, first of all, there are way more white people than there are people of color. Hence the term minority. So in numeric terms, more white people commit crimes than people of color.
Just do.
And we also know that across race, people commit crimes at the same rate. They use drugs at the same rate, commit crimes. However, there's a systematic detention and arrest of people of color because police and criminal justice seek out people of color to arrest. Seek out. So it's not that they commit crimes more often or more. They actually commit them the same rate as white people. But the only reason why there's a disproportionate number of people of color in jails and prisons at this moment is because there is evidence that the criminal justice system intentionally stops people of color, arrests people of color, And that's rooted in what you're talking about, that non-white is always seen as criminal. Non-white is seen as threatening. So I bet that if this little 14-year-old boy would have been white, they wouldn't have called the cops.
He probably would have been invited in for
breakfast.
breakfast.
They wouldn't have assumed he was breaking in, and the only reason they assume he was breaking in is because he was a black boy. And I feel...
And who breaks in and knocks on the door?
I know.